All right, welcome back, everybody. Ultimately, whether it's in our personal life, our corporate life, profitability is ultimately what we're aiming at. We are doing this for a reason. It's not just out of the goodness of our heart. There are many factors that go into that building that profitability. Yeah, you do need to measure the numbers and know what's going in, what's going out. We know what you're selling things for and what the margins are. But even more important to that is the way we go about things, the culture in which we surround ourselves has a direct correlation on the profitability of not only you as a person, but also of your corporate business life. All right. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. This is going to be a fantastic episode from a marketing perspective, because so many people think that your brand is just your logo. It's just the little swoosh. It's just the sticker that's put on the front of things, but it is so much more than that. It's not a flat issue. It's very 3 and 4 dimensional. There's so many aspects to understanding and communicating your brand so that ultimately it actually connects with the audience. It's so much, we're not just looking for something pretty on the wall. We want a connection, because ultimately the purpose of the brand is dollar signs. That's actually what we're actually looking for. We're not just trying to start an art gallery here. We're trying to run a business. So let me bring on a very special guest here. Christine Marie, how are you doing today?
Well, how are you, Todd?
Absolutely. Christine, so you run the Knowing Agency, a marketing agency, but you guys have a very unique approach to how you come about this process of building a brand. So fill us in a little bit about this unique approach, because it is so much more than just the colors.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, and actually I want to steal and I'll give credit. So it's not stealing, it's sharing.
Yeah.
I want to share the definition of brand actually from the employer who I was hired by most recently, 5 years ago, before I started my business. And they defined brand as setting a strong expectation for the experience someone's going to have. And I love that. And I've added in a few nuances to it. It's really setting the emotional expectation for the experience. And the emotional component is so incredibly important. Harvard finds that 95% of our business making decisions take place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions live. Therefore, it is so critical that a brand sets the emotional expectation through every touch point, right? That includes, yes, the logo, that includes the messaging, that includes the experience on the website, it includes the billboards that they see on the highway, it includes the digital ad. It's the experience that they get all the way up to talking to the customer representative or going to the cart to check out, where the conversion takes place. It is the strength of the brand that is setting the expectation for the experience that they're going to have upon conversion with the product offering or service.
So you're saying you're trying to link to the emotions of happily ever after. They're coming to your product for this happily ever after, and you're trying to embed those emotions, because we make buying decisions not rationally. We think we're being rational, but we're not rational at all. I love this. So, okay. So how do you, as a brand, find this emotional strain that creates this expectation of experience?
Yeah, so we focus a lot on who the company is and then who the brand who the audience is. So we focus on the brand, we focus on the audience. And hence our name, the Knowing Agency. We really want to know both parties, because it is the authenticity with which the brand presents itself that then builds the trust with the audience, that then lends them to even be curious about it. Because if the brand is not presenting themselves in a way that one feels authentic and true and honest, and there's a purity and an integrity to the brand, the outcome is that they will never stand out from their competitors. And the beauty of a strong brand is that their loyalty is so strong. And so, quick note on this: Coca-Cola did a blind taste test between I think it was Dr. Pepper and cola. And so the participants, they tasted it and they actually chose Dr. Pepper. But then when they found out that it was cola versus Dr. Pepper, and they chose Dr. Pepper, they were like, actually, I liked the other one better, because they were that loyal and that strong to the brand, hence the need to elicit emotions, right? And so in knowing the brand, knowing the audience, we really position the brand authentically, because then we pull forward, hey, here are our values. Here's our mission. This is why you should go with us. And focusing on the why, not just the product offering or service, then lends to the emotions of the audience. Well, I won't even say audience. Let's say consumers. The consumer has changed. No longer are people sitting on their couches watching TV and then making a purchase from TV. Yes, there's still some folks who do that, but primarily the purchase-making decision takes place behind your computer or with your iPhone. And so through that process, people need to feel emotionally compelled to the mission of the organization, some emotional urge within themselves where they feel seen, known, and heard. And by knowing the audience, and I'll get to that in a second in terms of how we do this, but knowing the audience is so important as to what is the emotional transformation they're looking for. Because a strong brand has a demarcation, and then people will say, oh, they're not for me. You want people to say they're not for me. And then you want people who are going to be so compelled to you because of your mission, because of the quality of your product.
Yeah, so maybe the transformation is what my next question is, what are the layers of the emotions that we're trying to communicate with the brand? I mean, there's trust, that's obvious. The credibility, that's obvious. But it's interesting that the blind taste test, they still went with the recognizable brand. So what are these layers of the emotion that we're trying to communicate with the brand?
Yeah, so the emotions that we're trying to communicate is and I don't even want to say emotion, because technically every single company is going, it's not about eliciting, it's about eliciting an emotion. It's not about projecting an emotion. And that's why I'm saying leading with authenticity, because what that does is that it removes any ounce of manipulation, because then you're having a connection with the customer. Because if you're authentic and they feel known and seen and heard, now you're going and you're sitting in their shoes and you're saying, I understand what you're experiencing right now. You're eliciting an emotion from them and showing them that you understand how they feel. That's empathy. And so in what we do and the way that we do it, our goal is to know the brand, to position them with authenticity, and then know the audience so that they can be met with empathy by the brand. And so it's so important that you know how the customer feels. So it's going to be so different per your customer, right? So one of our clients is a basement waterproofing company. That's very different than another one of our clients who, which example do I want to use? It's just so starkly different. Well, another one is a coach. And so she's going after these empowered women who are confident and they have businesses, they're owners. And so that's very different than somebody whose basement is having water everywhere, who's very frustrated and probably freaking out a little bit. You're going to talk to them very differently. And so the goal is to elicit an emotion in them so that they feel understood.
You know, I think the gut instinct of maybe the novice brander is, I just want to talk about myself. And most businesses just want to talk about themselves. But like Story Brand and Donald Miller says, it's actually an 80-20 split.
Yeah.
Only 20% talking about your credibility, 80% is empathy, just what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Again, it's not necessarily about talking. It's not about the credibility piece. Yes, the trust factor, but the more authentic you are in terms of connecting with them, where they don't feel like they're being emotionally manipulated, rather it's empathy, because there's a fine line, right? that you need to be careful about. But if the brand is leading with authenticity and they're brave enough to turn people away because they're not a good fit, that's when you know a brand is truly being authentic, is when they have lovers and haters.
So how do we communicate these things? What are some of the ways that we can communicate that within our brand?
Yeah. So, well, if you don't mind, can I start with like discovery? How do we actually discover what our customer wants, needs, feels? And so, what we do when we start working with companies is we actually do a 60 to 90-day audit. And we go in and we actually talk to the customers. We go in and we do, yes, a digital survey to receive responses from their mass email lists, but we actually identify their top 20, 25, 30 customers, and we get on a call and we talk to I do, I sit and talk with every single person, because then in curating the marketing strategy and then saying, hey, look, these are the changes you need to make to your website for the messaging, it's based on and predicated in the comments of the customers and what really matters to them. And y'all, the reason why this is so important, for one customer in particular, their sales team thought that their customer's biggest hang up with their service was price. They thought that they were too expensive. But then when we talked to the customers, they found out that actually they don't really care about price so much. They really, really care about the longevity of the product itself. And so, well, now our sales guys are going to talk very, very differently, because our customers actually, yes, they care about price, but they care so much more about the quality. So now you're connecting. And the goal is connection in the communication, whether the communication is digital or person to person. And so that's really, really the goal that we're striving to achieve. So that's one of the biggest things that is helpful, doing those digital surveys and then talking, like actually having conversations.
Removing assumption. And I
Yes.
mean, it's just that is so powerful, but it's such an intentional action
Yes.
to remove assumption. And because look at the breakthrough that company had when they
Yes.
thought they were battling price, and that wasn't the battle at all.
Oh,
And if
oh
you
my
know what you're battling, that changes everything.
and it informs business decisions too.
It
Like,
does.
this is where it's really important, because another company, though, when we did the audit, we found that it actually was price. And
Okay.
so now they're going in and they're implementing a lot of SOPs. They're deciding to open new offices to eliminate shipping. It's a construction company, so they had to ship their vehicles. What's the term?
Carefully.
Yeah, they would have to ship them, and so that jacked up their pricing. And so if customers really did care most about price, which is in this category, they did. So that's dramatically changing the way that they're going to be doing business now.
And if price isn't the issue and you assume it is, and you're like, oh, we're going to have to lower our prices down, and then you just killed your margin,
Yes,
not
exactly.
doing the difficult work and actually diving
Right.
in. So
Right.
I love this picture of investigating the experience is
Mhm.
removing the assumptions, actually diving in and finding what the actual truth is.
Yes. Couldn't have said it better myself, Todd.
I think you did say it. I just repeated it back. I
I
was
know,
just
the summary though was really brilliant. I'm like, man, that's good.
Christine, thank you so much. The Knowing Agency is a great place to find that story that connects to the audience. Thank you for adding this wrinkle of this new dynamic to the brand, because it is so much more than the sticker we put on the outside. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, stick with us. We're going to look at another angle of how do we create your brand. Let's get behind it. Let's do it together. See you in a second. All right, welcome back, everybody. Like we said, your brand is way more than just a logo. But if you don't build a brand, people aren't going to really know who you are, what you stand for, and more specifically, why they can trust you. And even more specifically, what problem you actually solve. So on today's show, I'm bringing on a good friend of mine and a branding expert, Brad Ball with Ardent Creative. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How about you?
I love it. And thank you so much for being on the show, because your expertise is extremely vital. I mean, you work with massive advertising campaigns for TCU and Alcon Labs, but also do software development with your company. So it's this very intricate balance within your company where but brand is what it's all about, and the message being sent. Now, you specifically have a very interesting philosophy on this, and it's a philosophy of being fully branded. What does that mean?
So what that means is the fact that a lot of times, as you know, creative guy, I thought of the brand as being just the logo or maybe the images. But really, when you look at a brand, it's a lot more than that. Right now, you have things like story brand, which it's the story behind a brand. But you really got to piece all these things together: the mission, the vision, the culture, the core values, who you think you are, but also who your customer thinks you are is a part of the brand. And that includes the logo, the imagery, and how you represent yourself in the market. That really creates a full brand and what's important to really differentiate yourself in the market.
So really, it's this full package. So many people think it's just the swoosh, it's just the
Mhm.
logo. So where do you really begin? One of the things you and I talked about, it does even begin with just the name of your company instead of just Steve's Contractors. What talk to me a little bit about even at that beginning level of how you name a company. What are the thoughts that go into that?
Well, traditionally, aside from some of the old companies like Tiffany's or Ford, you typically don't name your company after yourself. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, because you don't necessarily want your company to hinge upon the founder or the owner. So you can take the person out and it makes it more valuable that way. So as a brand, naming is important because it also needs to be a reflection of who you are. So our company is Ardent. Why did we name it Ardent? Well, Ardent means passionate, and we're about passionate with what we do. And so passionate about creativity, and that's really where the name came from. Another one of my companies, it's a software application that we developed for an oil and gas company, and it's based upon data, and the name is called Verity. Well, in Latin, Verity means truth, and so it's truth behind the data, truth in data, and that's really where the name came from. And it's also something that's recognizable and unique. And I heard a story one time, I forget, I think it was shoes.com was having a hard time differentiating themselves as a brand, because where did you buy your shoes? Oh, shoes.com. And it just didn't really have any identity to it. So what they end up rebranding as? Zappos. And so I'm sure everybody's heard about Zappos, and there's a whole story behind that. But that's really the premise behind why a name is so important, because you want to have a differentiating identity so people can remember you. And so why is Nike so big? Well, they've done a ton of advertising over the years, but some of their campaigns, just do it, that's associated with Nike, and you never forget that. And so that's really why naming's important. And the logo just kind of validates that and ensures that when people see it, they recognize you.
That's so you lay out really two very interesting points. First off is the not naming after yourself because of the resale value. So that I guess as the owner, so you can exit and not everything is anchored to you as a person.
Correct.
Is that the thought process behind that?
Well, yeah, and I can take that a step further, because one thing you also have to do in naming and coming up with a logo, is it trademarkable? And so I had a friend who launched a company and went through the trademark process only to be denied. Well, her not having that trademark would devalue her company. And
Oh,
so I went through a whole naming process to identify really who they were as a company and what they did, and ended up coming up with a better name that really described who they were and what they were doing in the marketplace. They loved it. They got all the domain names, the social media handles, as well as the trademark is in the filing process right now. And that was so once they go to exit, because her goal is to build an exit, that trademark will have a bigger value in the company than if they didn't have it.
so there's a couple of schools of thought on that next layer you said, because you said the two companies you have, they allude to a value that you believe in, but then you got Story Brand, who's like, if you confuse, you lose, and you need to simplify the message. So the naming, does it need to allude to the value or the service that's being rendered?
I think it can go either way. I think part of it is just what you want people to see when they see that name. What's most important to you? And so for me, personally, I like to come up with unique names that people can remember, that we can get all the different social handles. But in the marketplace, like, I don't necessarily want to be a marketing company. I wouldn't necessarily, if I was in a specific niche, I wouldn't want to name my company just after that niche. Because what happens if you scale outside that niche is that you now are stuck with that name and you can't grow outside of it. So even as we look at names and look at niches or targeted audiences, I believe in building verticals so you can go into multiple areas of business and scale and grow that way versus just focusing on one target audience.
It's interesting. So tell me more and tell the audience more. What does that mean, going vertical? And as you name your company, how do you make sure you can still go vertical?
So in the marketing world, you have a lot of focused agencies, meaning they're going to focus on home services or HVAC, legal, and that's all they do. And they're hyper focused. They're really good at it. But I'll ask the question for you to think about. If you were in the event space in 2020, what happened? You were shut down. You had no business because nobody was going to events. It's taken a couple of years for it to get back. So when you're hyper focused on an industry, you got to be sure it can withstand economic recessions and difficult times. Because if you're in the event business, it went away. And so verticals would be, okay, you got event business, but I understand the processes. I can build the structure out. How can I duplicate that to another industry that is, a little different, but my processes are sound? So then I can grow my business. I could almost double it by going into another vertical. And so then it's a process of duplication or multiplication. And so then you can go into different verticals, whether it's legal or medical or construction. And so once you have the processes, then it's just duplicatable.
I gotcha. So even beyond just the target audience specifically that your business is aiming at, it's even just industry verticals that the business can aim at. So you want the name to be able to cross-pollinate or be able to still be applicable in either one.
Correct. Yeah. And in right now we're in this age of the influencer where everybody's got to build their personal brands, which we can talk about that for a while in its own right. And, the personal brand is great, but I caution a lot of people, just don't let it be to the detriment of the company, because you want people to remember that the company is the one that does all the work, just not the person. And so right now we're in this weird flux with, these major influencers making a ton of money, but who are the companies behind those? Like Tesla, we know because of Elon Musk, but you take Elon Musk away at this point, is Tesla still going to run? Yes. And so that's the juxtaposition we're in right now with this influencer age and branding and how we can distinguish the two. So I'm very big on narrowing in the company versus the person.
Absolutely. Because there's like many situations where the company will have an internal influencer. And the problem is that when that person leaves the company, then there goes the lead flow as well.
Correct. They can take that whole business and now the business is going to really struggle because they don't have that person leading that charge. And, I could see a lot of companies shutting down because they rely on that one person, that one influencer for their business.
Yeah, it can really create a very difficult situation. Okay, so beyond the name, what's the next thing that a person needs to develop?
So this kind of goes in tandem. The way we approach it is we then look at the logo and the image brand itself. And so when people come to us and say, hey, I need a logo, my first reaction is, what are you actually looking for? Is it a logo? We build brands versus just logo, because you can go online and find somebody building a logo. But a brand, it's your colors, it's your fonts, it's a brand standards book. So when you go out in the marketplace, you know exactly who you are and what you want to represent. And so in that can come in your tagline or catchphrases and things like that. So you really hone in on who you are as a company. And then that rolls into the copy and the story behind the company. And so really it's a step-by-step process. So by the time you're done with it, if you're just starting out, hopefully you've established the core values, who you are as a company and where you're going. That's kind of the beginning process. But it doesn't end. there's an ongoing process. I'll go back through our core values at least every couple of years. Hey, does this still define who we are? It always does, but just having the conversation of who are we, where are we going, and does this line up with where we want to go?
You mind if we, after the next commercial break, would you talk just more about this forming the values and forming the identity of the company? Because ultimately, like you said, it's the whole thing. Everything connects together. So Brad, stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. It's way more than just a logo. It's way more than the colors. It's way more than the name. And if you're Steve's Contractors, we now learn you don't want to name it after yourself. Hey, stick with us. We'll be right back. Let's get into the identity of your brand and who you are. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm loving this conversation with Brad Ball. You know, your brand and who you are as a company is way more than a logo, way more than the colors, but you want everything to be connected in this holistic approach. And it all begins with what is not only the story that you're telling, but who are you as a company? What's the mission behind it? What are the values of who you are that differentiates you from the company next to you? Let me bring Brad back on again. Brad, I'm excited to unfold this even more because, one, it was enlightening to hear don't name your company after yourself because then you can't sell it. The value is less. You need to make sure things are trademarked.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you can have that name across all platforms so it's consistent. And then you said you go into the color schemes because colors mean things psychologically, but all of that is really secondary to who you really are as a company. So when you work with companies and you're developing that brand, how do you bring that out and help them tell that narrative or that story?
So one of our biggest projects that we did was for one of Samsung's companies. And it was a newer company. They were doing network, like big, router type things for stadiums. And they had no idea who they were. And so we actually pulled them in to our office for 3 days. And the first day we were asking them question after question after question, getting them to tell us who they felt they were. And then the second day we kept doing it, digging deeper, reaffirming these key things of identity about who they were as a company, who they were as imagery, and so on and so forth. By the end of the second day and then the third day, we started giving them all the information back. And at first they're like, I'm not sure about this. Where is it going? Are they actually going to be able to perform? By the end of the third day, they were blown away because we were able to identify, because we kept asking things over and over, who they were, where they were going, what images resonated, and then really create that brand around that. Because when you get somebody to engage and actually talk about who they are, the more they own it, and then the more you can really create that brand around that story. And so that was really a powerful experience for both of us. But that's one of the ways that we really try to dig into it.
So let's unpack that a little bit more. As a coach, I'm a lover of questions. So clarify again what the most powerful questions you could ask in that situation. Because you said is who you are, where you're going, and then what pictures do you resonate?
So yeah, that's part of it. So I'll give you an example. They wanted strength and power. And so in that, their main image on their site was actually this white tiger. And it was a beautiful representation of really that image they wanted to portray. A white tiger for networks. Yeah, because you're talking about a network always up. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be strong. That's the identity they wanted behind their network, not something soft or something weak. It needed to show, hey, we're a strong company and we're here to, thrive and help these businesses that choose us to thrive as well. And so that was kind of the premise behind the imagery. Now, some companies, like let's take a florist, for example, they're going to have a much softer kind of feel. And so everybody is different. If you're in the home services industry, a construction company, a lot of them look kind of the same. Well, how can you differentiate a construction company from another one? A lot of it's from the imagery and the story that you tell. And so that's why going through asking, specific questions like who you are, who you want people to see when they see you, And, sometimes we don't even have to ask questions. They'll just, if they know who they are, they will tell us. It's getting them to write it down and identify that, because most founders will have an idea of who they are, but they've never put it down on paper. And whenever you put pen to paper, it really resonates.
And that's probably the most practical aspect of this, because the business leader, the business owner, they feel like they know who they are, but that practical step of writing it down, like you said, even when you were working with the Samsung group, actually them seeing it on paper was the transformative process, and the leverage point of this.
I mean, we had like a 7 by 10 foot whiteboard that was just filled with words, and it was coming up with a mission statement, vision statement, and core values. And we just started writing words down, and then you start to piece together those different words or combinations, and we came up with our whole story. Soon after, the document ended up being like 50 pages.
Wow.
Who they were as a brand. Yeah.
And how do you balance the who they want to be? Because there's many leaders and business owners, CEOs, they have a vision for who they are, but then there's a reality who they actually are. How do you help them balance the two of who they feel like they want to be versus when the rubber meets the road, where they are? Is it pulling in what do the customers say, or how do you balance those two?
I think there's two different things that you got to look at first. Number one is who you are in the office, who the staff thinks you are, because that's important. For us as a company, we have this phrase, we work to live, not live to work. And that could be the work-life balance type of idea. But the thought process behind it is we don't work for our livelihood. All right. It's the things that we do. We work so that we can live and have experiences and spend time with our family. Our work doesn't define us. And so that's an important value within our group. And I have a story that's pretty awesome. One of our long-term developers, he's worked, several different businesses. And one Christmas, we gave out Christmas bonuses. And instead of just giving bonuses, we had envelopes. And that Christmas party, we went through each one individually and shared something amazing about them, whether it was something they accomplished that year or something awesome about them, and then gave them their bonus check. And I didn't do it myself. I had our executive team, each person kind of pick somebody and then share that. And this particular developer comes up to me afterwards and he goes, "Man, Ardent is the best place I've ever worked with." He says, "When you talk about family, you mean it. Because if I have something that comes up, I can take care of it. I have to get my work done, but you give me the freedom to still have a family and do what I need to do." And that's the culture we created within the business. Those are the values that we created within business because we've communicated it. And a lot of companies, they just do business. It's like, do this, do this, do this. And they forget about really sowing and developing their people into leaders. And that's the most important thing you can do, especially as a business owner. If you want to ever exit, you got to build leaders that can take the company farther than you. And you hear the idea of hiring A players. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, as an owner, I need to hire people that are smarter than me and be okay with that. And a lot of owners are not. They want to be the smartest person in the room.
and it's John Maxwell's law of the lid at that point, where you are the thing that's capping your company from growing. Okay, so within those cultural elements, how do you find the truth there? How do you because if the leader is just the one making the observations on that, I don't know if you're getting the truth on that. So how do you really hear from your team so when the rubber meets the road, who you really are internally, and then who you are with your customers?
I think it's, as a leader, you should cast a vision, you kind of lead the direction. From there, you have to have a core group of people. Like we have an executive team of 5 people. They have to own that culture as well. And that has to resonate to them. So I got to lead them in that culture and who we are as a company. And sometimes we have to make bad decisions. We've had experiences where customers have talked down to our employees or even yelled at our employees. Guess what happened? Those customers were no longer with us. We stood up for employees and we said, not in a bad way, we don't need your business, but it wasn't a fit. And a lot of times as companies, when we I'm kind of going off a tangent here, but as companies, we want all the business that we can get, but it's okay to say no. Not every business is going to work out. You're not going to sell everybody. But the customers you have, you turn into advocates. And that's where you can really see growth, because a lot of times you spend more time trying to take care of that 20% that's difficult, and you spend more time on that than you do the 80% that really love what you do.
And really, it's that clarity, getting on paper, getting it in writing, clarity on who you are and what you stand for, that then dictates your ability to say yes or say no, to know, like you said, that this client isn't a fit, but you really almost need permission to say that. And these values and clarity around who you are as a brand, that becomes the permission statement for no, that just doesn't match our values. It didn't match your family values within your company. And so
even in the beginning of the sales process, we'll fill out if the client's going to be a fit or not. And we'll tell them up front, hey, this is a trial period. We're going to see, hey, if we're fit with you and vice versa, because it's not just one-sided. Because if we're not fit for them, then we'd rather bless them and help them find that perfect fit, because we're all about relationships. And there's a lot of business in this world. And I have friends that are in the agency world that we used to compete with. We'd also send business to each other. And so we don't want to burn bridges. And so it's all about relationships. And if we can help somebody, that's the most important thing. It's a servant attitude versus a selling attitude.
Okay, so once you, like you said, a 50-page document, you had the whiteboard written all over with all the words that they resonated with, the pictures they resonated with, the images they resonated with. How do you refine it from there? What's the next and final step, so it's not just this mass of data and information?
So you take it piece by piece. So it's 50 pages. There's some pages of the logo, what it looks like, what you should and should not do with the logo. So a lot of people, you see a PowerPoint or something like that, and a logo gets squished or distorted. That's a no-no. And so we define all those things. And part of it is, so if they send their logo out to a printer or another designer, they have the standards to follow. So that way their brand always stays within its standard. And so that's really important. A lot of people say, I just want a logo, but they don't go through that process, and it ends up distorting down the line. And so going through that process, then it's, there were headlines. What are the key headlines? What's the mission? What's the vision? It went through this whole long process. So then you just take it out into segments along the way through the whole process. And it was very extensive, probably the most extensive one we've ever done. A lot of them are much smaller, but because of the scope of the project, it was just much larger to make sure we defined every piece for that company.
I love that. Like we started, there's so much more than just the logo, so much more than just the colors, so much more than just the name. It's really defining who you are, defining what you stand for, how you want to live in this world as a company. And that dictates your ability to say yes, to say no, and really how the impact you want to make in this world. Brad, thank you so much for the time. Where's a good place where people can follow you and see some of the creative work that you do?
The easiest way is bradball.com.
Oh, I love it. Bradball.com. Brad, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you, man.
All right, everybody. It's way more than logo. You got to define who you are as a person, who you are as a company, so that you represent in the marketplace exactly who you want to be and the impact that you want to make. Stick with us. We've got more right after this. All right. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. Your brand is way more than your logo. It's way more than the colors. It's the who you are behind that facade. It's who you are behind the fantastic colors, the tagline, the motto, all the superficial upfront communication, important communication aspects. But there's more to that behind it. How do you then let other people know about that, so that your website, your brand, your logo, all the things that people can see, they're not just a billboard stuck in the middle of the forest where no one has any clue where it's actually at. So let me bring on a special guest, Sean Barnes with the Way of the Wolf. And so, Sean, shine a light into this for us because it's more than just a logo. Logos are important, colors are important, mottos are important, taglines are important, but your brand, and specifically in shrinking the gap to where your brand is actually connected to a person, there's an intentional action involved with that. So
There truly is. And so I've got a lot to unpack here, but our brand is extremely powerful. And our brand is being shaped whether we want it to or not. So why not be intentional about it? And being intentional about it is understanding, what is your mission? What is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to put out into the world? And so this is kind of the result of, as we move through our lives, figuring out what that means. If you are stumbling around in life, it's probably going to be challenging for you to build any sort of meaningful or powerful brand. But when you stand for something, and you consistently do that thing over and over, week after week, after month, after year, people are going to start to associate Sean with leadership, Sean with the Way of the Wolf, right? So you have to be intentional about it. And it's tough because as we go through these seasons of our lives, there's going to be ups and downs. But what you don't want is to build a brand and reputation of, oh, well, I started a podcast, I got 15 episodes in, and I got tired of it. And
so let's camp on that. This thing you're fighting for. First, how do you find it, define it, and then move forward into it?
Well, I think this is a balance of trial and error and just kind of figuring out who you are at your core. And there are a number of people that I've worked with over the years that they'll go try to start this business and it doesn't do well. So, well, let me try this. Well, that doesn't do well. Well, let me try this. Well, you have to give yourself enough time. If you're starting a new business or starting a new podcast or new YouTube channel every 2 or 3 months, you're not giving yourself enough time in the seat to actually have a depth of knowledge in that domain and start providing value. And so if you are intent on building a brand, maybe you start a podcast, maybe you start a YouTube channel, be prepared to go all in for a very long period of time before you start getting traction. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it's something like only 10% of podcasts ever get past the first 15 episodes. That's ludicrous. People think that, well, I'm going to start a podcast and then I'm going to sell it for $100 million in a few months. It just doesn't happen. You have to be willing to put in the time and the energy, and you have to be patient, and you have to just eat glass for a few years, knowing that your mission and purpose is greater than the no views or the lack of engagement for the first few years. But what will happen if you are consistent enough over a long enough time horizon, you will start to get better and you will start to see results and you will build a powerful brand.
So you feel like the first step of that is positioning yourself for the long term. Whatever your brand, whether it's personal or a business, having the mindset of I'm, like you said, I love that. It made me laugh immediately. I'm going to eat some glass. I'm going to eat some glass. I'm going to feel like I'm not doing anything. I'm going to feel like no one is listening. I'm going to feel like I'm yelling into a cavern. But it's that mindset of the long term. And so how do you do that? What do you need to believe? What do you need to do internally? Or maybe are there reminders or anchors? How do you get yourself to where you can build that consistency for the long term? Because like you said, the vast majority of people don't. So how do you position yourself to where you can face the long term?
Well, I think it all comes down to identifying your mission and purpose. My personal mission in life is to positively impact the generational legacy of everybody that I work with. Now, that's a big, bold mission. And whenever I started the podcast a little over 3 years ago, I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to turn into, but I started it with two reasons. One, I wanted to get out of my shell and become better at communications with people that I never met. But two, I wanted to help coach and guide and build other people. And I have been able to achieve decent levels of success in life and career. And so now I have this obligation to turn around and pull people up with me and show them what I have learned over the years. And so whenever I set out to build the YouTube channel and the podcast and build the brand of the Way of the Wolf, that was my mission and purpose. And the first year, I kind of jokingly talk about people. I had 4 or 5 viewers and downloads for the first year, but I didn't care because I was viewing it through a lens of, you know what, that's 4 or 5 more people that I'm able to help and provide value to. And if you go into it knowing this is my mission, this is my purpose, I don't care how many views that I get, because quite frankly, you are not going to be good in the beginning. We are not good at anything when we start. But over time, we get better. We provide value. And over time, the views and downloads have just gradually started moving more and more in the better direction. And I'm getting better. I'm getting more comfortable. I'm getting more proficient. And the content and value that I add continues to increase. But I'm not doing it for the views. I'm not doing it for the downloads. I'm doing it to positively affect lives. That is my mission. And that's why there's such a close correlation to the Way of the Wolf and then my company, WSS. You see the 3 bars here. Each bar, every time we move through life, we have to level up. And that's the intent behind these 3 bars.
So I heard you say 2 really critical things in that. One is having a clear picture of what your real mission, what you really want to accomplish, and having it bigger than just something you can accomplish in a quarter. So it's very aspirational, something that magnetically pulls you towards, something you're going to have to eat glass for, and you're willing to eat glass for. Clearly, I like that your line on that. But the next thing I heard you say was finding the little wins. Is in celebrating I connected with that person and I changed their life. So it's those little wins amassing together. Would you say that's the second step of being able to move towards the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't ignore how powerful those little wins are in our life, because they keep you going. Again, as we go through these ebbs and flows and seasons of our life, if it's just loss after loss after loss after loss, that is going to erode at anybody's confidence. But if you chunk things up and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on getting 100 downloads this month, and then you blast social media, you send it to friends, and then you hit that 100 download mark. And then a year goes by, you know what, I'm going to hit 1,000 this month. And so you set these milestones. And, you know, there are people out there like Grant Cardone, 10X. If your goal is 100,000, shoot for 1 million. Okay, but we have to also be realistic. Let's get aggressive with them, but let's also be realistic. Let's challenge ourselves. And we have to figure out and find out what that balance looks like for us. Because if I set a 1 million download target, that's going to be tough. And if I miss it, a little bit of a blow to the ego, that's also going to be tough. So we have to figure out what works for us, figure out how to map out what those wins look like, and start documenting and start celebrating. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, I hit 1 million downloads, I'm just going to check out, I'm not going to do anything anymore. No, you have to keep moving forward. And that's why your mission is so crucial.
So in the psychology of rewards and punishments, how do you, share with the audience, how do you celebrate those little wins? Is it just being intentional to go checkbox? How do you celebrate it to where it doesn't just pass by you and you're just on to the next thing, but you use it as a stepping stone?
Oh man, that is I don't know. I'm trying to think back. So earlier in my life, so I grew up without any money. And early in my life, as I came out of school and started working and started earning more, eventually my wins would be celebrated by, I always wanted a Tag Heuer watch. So bought a nice tag. And then at one point, my dream car was a Corvette ZR1. I spent years and years saving. I was able to get a VP title and a big salary, and I went out and bought a ZR1. Now that's a pretty extreme example,
but you're saying build in little rewards that if I do this, then I'm going to reward myself. It could be ice cream at the same time. It could be, I mean, because I love some coffee flavored shake, and I always get the size too big, and I always finish it way too fast. But those rewards, it doesn't have to be a Corvette, it doesn't have to be a fancy car. It can be just that small little thing. So Sean, thank you so much for the time. Where can people find you and hear more about the Way of the Wolf?
Yeah, I think you can just Google the Way of the Wolf. Check us out. We've got a YouTube channel on all audio platforms. And then just the website is just thewayofthewolf.com.
All right, Sean Barnes, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, it's way more than just a logo. It's about the mission that pulls you forward, and then the ability to persist over time. Because if, like he said, if you don't have enough time in the seat, you're not going to really know the results. So position yourself for the time and find those little rewards and trophies that can keep you moving forward in your brand.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.